Watch it. Okay, so now it's being recorded. And my name is Maria Spinetti, and I am one of the graduate assistants at the Student Academic Resource Center. And I'm pretty sure, yeah, in the chat, one of my colleagues just dropped the link to a Qualtrics form for you to just give us feedback on this workshop if it was helpful and what we can do to improve it. So we will also add it at the end of the workshop just so that you can complete it before you go. It really helps us out, so make sure you do that before you leave. And with that, I think we have quite a few people here, and a few more people are joining us, but I'm gonna go ahead and get started. If at any point you have a question, you need me to repeat something, or you didn't understand something, feel free to either say something in the chat, or if I keep going and you realize that I'm not really looking at the chat, feel free to use your mic and I'll go ahead and answer whatever question or comment you might have. So today we're going to be talking about study habits and metacognition, and we named this workshop Meld. My name is, as I mentioned, Maria Spinetti, and I am one of the graduate assistants at the Student Academic Resource Center. Before we go into the topic, I just want to talk a little bit about SARC services, as we have transitioned online and we have added quite a few services, and some of them have changed a little bit. So we offer peer tutoring, which is our group peer tutoring, which is your traditional type of tutoring. And our tutors have a set schedule for the classes that they do tutoring for, and you can find that schedule and all the schedules for everything that I will be mentioning in the SARC website. We also do one-on-one peer tutoring for certain classes, so you can also find that within our website. We also have supplemental instruction, which is one of the programs that the one program that I oversee. Supplemental instruction is a similar concept to tutoring, but it has a few different things. It's similar to a study session, a group study session, in which you come in and you go over material that's exactly being covered by your instructor. Peer tutoring is a bit more general in terms of the subject. Supplemental instruction targets the specific instructor that the course is, that's teaching a specific course. We also have academic coaching and engagement, and your coaches can help you to develop study skills that are not particular to a class, but overall they can also help you with things like textbook reading and finding ways that are prepared for your classes, and also with time management. It is a very helpful resource, especially now that we are transitioning into the online, well, we have transitioned already into the online format, in which you can get continuous support. So if you need someone to hold you accountable, coaches are great for that. We also have online instructional peer coaching. So if you really need help in the online environment and how to navigate your courses, web courses, reading a syllabus, everything being online, your peer coaches can also help with that. And then we have academic success workshops, which is this one you're in. And we have a few more throughout the semester, so I highly encourage you to go and find the other ones for the future. And then we have SARC Online, which I'll be sharing some resources today with you that are also part of SARC Online. But if you're ever having any questions about any study skills, test prep, test taking, all of that, we have a lot of worksheets and resources with a lot of helpful information for that. And with that, we are going to get into what we're going to be talking today. So today our objectives are discussing the role of a fixed and growth mindset in studying. Then we're going to be discussing memory and the role of encoding in learning. We're going to understand what self-regulated learning and executive functions are, understand that metacognition is the basis for changing study behavior, and discuss specific metacognitive strategies and how to utilize and implement them within your courses. So at first I'm going to talk a little bit, but I'll also be asking you a few questions, and you will be able to answer those through the chat, or also turning on your mics and speaking that way. So the first thing we're going to talk about is mindset, which is what determines our reactions to challenges, obstacles, criticism, and the success of others. So we have two distinct mindsets. We have the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. In the fixed mindset, people believe that intelligence is static. It means that you are either born with it or you are not, that you cannot improve on it, that you're either good at math or you're not, that you're either good at learning or you're not. So that's having a fixed mindset. And then a growth mindset is believing that intelligence can be developed. So knowing that you might have started at one point, but through practice, you can improve on it. People that have a fixed mindset, they avoid challenges. So instead of taking a particular activity, for example, if you think in my case, I used to think I could never be good at sports. I had a very fixed mindset with it, so I would never try on new sports. The same thing can be for your classes. So you might not try enrolling in a class that you might think it's too difficult, so you'll be avoiding a challenge. You will also give up easily if you have a fixed mindset when it comes to encountering obstacles. So maybe you had your first test and you didn't do too well. With a fixed mindset, you might be giving up and not continuing to study. With a fixed mindset, you see effort as fruitless. So it doesn't matter if you study and study. If you have a fixed mindset, you believe that you're already not good enough or you can improve on it. And then you also, people with fixed mindsets see criticism as something that should be ignored and that's not useful, something that goes against you. So oftentimes people would take criticism personally because they think they're attacking them, or they just think there's no need to even try to listen to it because I can get better at this. And finally, they see the success of others as something that is a threat to them as a person. Contrary to that, people with a growth mindset embrace challenges. So they might take on a course that's challenging or that they have never taken because they believe that they can improve from it. With obstacles, they will persist. They will know that by trying different things, they will be able to succeed. They would see effort as a path to mastery. So they will try and try and try, and they'll try different things as well. And they would really put in the effort or the work to do better at it. They will be learning from criticism, so they will listen carefully to it and see how they can apply it and get better because of it. And finally, they will see the success of others and they will find lessons from it that would help them improve, and they will be inspired by what others are doing. So with the fixed and growth mindsets, there will be certain things in which you might have more of a growth mindset. Maybe if you've tried different sports and you've seen that you can get better at those, maybe you'll have a growth mindset, but maybe you'll have a fixed mindset when it comes to, for example, chemistry. And you would say, there's no way I can learn that. I'm not cut out for that. So when we're thinking about studying and the courses that we have, it is important to see them with a growth mindset. Because if you do see them with a growth mindset, that's when you can start trying different things. That's when you will, again, put in the effort to get better at those, and you will find those challenges and those obstacles to help you get better at that. And we're going to be talking more about how to, and all the resources that we're going to be talking about today will be focusing more on that growth mindset, because we are believing that we can improve from studying, from practicing in our courses. Now, we talked about the mindset, and another more of like psychological or brain function that also help us to determine how we can study is knowing how learning works. So you probably have heard of sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. When it comes to sensory memory, it's when you get an input from the world, and that's when something gets triggered within your memory. And when you go to tutoring or to SI or even within your instructors, you would see that some of them will try to use different ways to present information. So some of them will be talking, some of them will be having, like here we have a presentation, so that's more of a visual input. I'm also talking, so that's more of a hearing input. If you were, for example, if you're an engineer major and you're doing I know they always used to build a boat and then just put it in the reflection pond. That's more of a hands-on thing. So that's also sensory input. These are all the different ways in which you can trigger your memory to bring up information. So when you're studying, you also want to be thinking about that. So first you receive that input, and then you take it into your short-term memory or your working memory. So those are things that are easily retrievable. So those are things that are kind of like in your mind at the moment. And then through practicing, through studying, through reading, which is the learning process, that's when you're able to move that information into your long-term memory. Now, when you have it in your long-term memory, what's important is that you're able to recall it. And that recalling process often happens through some type of input that you bring in, whether that's that you're sitting down to do practice problems for your Calc 1 class, or you're sitting down to do homework for your Chem 2 class. That's when you start bringing up that information. However, if you're not able to move information from your short-term memory into the long term, then there's nothing there you can retrieve. So when we talk about this, we also talk about something that I find very fascinating, not gonna lie, and it's the forgetting curve. So this was a study done quite a while back, and the person that did it was trying to figure out how long does it take for you to forget information. And as you can see, it's quite a curve. And the first time you hear about it, you'll remember, you're bringing up the 100% of the information. After one day, as you can see here, you forget a lot of it. You're down to almost like 50%. And after 2 days, you keep forgetting more, and you keep forgetting more and more and more. Now, think about it in terms of when you have an exam. You might, if you don't study for it, you'll be losing a lot of information, because let's say you had your lecture about a month ago. Imagine how little information you're going to be able to recall if you haven't successfully studied for it, or if you haven't tried to recall that information at some point to skip or to break this forgetting curve. The good thing is that whomever did this also studied how can we break that forgetting curve. They found out, as we talked about recalling that information, that you can combat it by actively going over information again. So as you can see, on this day, they went to like a lecture, and they went over all this information. Then one day after, as you can see here, they got an email maybe about all the information that was there, and they went back to 100%. And now when they're forgetting, as you can see, the curve doesn't go down as fast. Now, when you recall that information 7 days later, that curve, again, is not going, you're not forgetting as much as fast. So that's what we want to do when we're studying. We want to consciously be breaking that forgetting curve, making sure that you bring up that information. And here, the examples that they have up here, those are different ways in which you can recall that information. So the first one might be that you listen to information in lecture, and then maybe you got an email, or maybe you had to read a part of the textbook. Then you might be, and I know not everybody is a fan of discussion posts in web courses, but those also help you break that cycle. So instead of just always reading your textbook, you might want to vary it by maybe doing a discussion post, or maybe writing a short paragraph on that information. And then this example would be kind of if you were working with a group or studying with a group, and you try to teach it to someone else. Again, you keep on breaking that cycle. Whatever you do here, it's up to you. How you decide to break that cycle is up to you. But what I want to emphasize here is that spaced repetition of information that you need to do when you're studying. Especially, a lot of you will be taking on classes that are prerequisites for other subjects later on. And that's when it's really important that you are really remembering that information for the future. If you are going to be maybe going into an engineering major, and you're taking Calc 1 or 2, you want to make sure you're not forgetting that by the time you get to statics or dynamics. If you are planning on going into med school, whatever you're going over in organic chemistry needs to be remembered when you go into med school. So these are different subjects or different examples of reasons why this spaced repetition is very important. If you're able to constantly break that or combat that forgetting curve, then you're more likely to remember information later on. So another one of the things we're going to talk today about is self-regulated learning. And self-regulated learning is regulating our behavior, thinking, and emotions. By manipulating our cognition, so our executive functions, we can reach specific goals, and we'll talk more about metacognition. But what comes to self-regulated learning is being aware of what it is that you're doing, being aware of what things or different strategies that you're using to learn. How can you improve on those? So it's thinking about procrastination, which I'm sure if we had all of your pictures here, everybody would be either nodding or raising their hands like, yeah, I struggle with procrastination. So these are the types of things that we need to be able to regulate when it comes to the learning process. It also comes back to thinking. We talked about growth mindset. How do we think about our ability to improve in a specific topic or improve in a specific field? And also our emotions towards learning and towards the process. I'm sure that sitting down for hours and hours on end to study seems very anxiety-inducing or stressful or even annoying. So you need to be aware of how you're going into the learning process in order to better prepare for it. And when you're aware of the types of emotions that a certain or a specific practice or study skill give you, that's when you need to think, okay, if sitting down for, which is the most common thing I know people do, to cram the night before the exam, if that gives me anxiety the days prior, no one should be cramming, but particularly if it's anxiety inducing for you and several days before the test, you're anxious because you haven't studied properly and because you keep procrastinating, that's when you need to be aware of those emotions and be able to take action in order to change those emotions and to be in a more controlled state. So I want us to talk a little bit, and this is where I'm going to ask you all to either drop it in the chat or to use your mic to tell me, how do you think self-regulated learning, which is again what we talk, being aware of your emotions, being aware of the behaviors or the practices that you have, and also being aware of your own thinking process or your mindset, how do you think that can be useful in modifying how you study? So I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about it. I'll be waiting for all of your responses on the chat. Let me see. And I'm going to get out of here so that I can also see the chat. And we have quite a few people, so I expect quite a few responses. Awesome. So I see quite a few responses, so I'm going to start reading them, but if you have some more, feel free to add them to the chat. Thank you to everyone who has been replying. So the first one we have from Jess, being aware of study habits and knowing how to correct them. Then we have from Jordan, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name. I am terrible at names. I really try hard, but I'm terrible. You can avoid stressful environments so you're more focused and retain more information. That's great. I think also particularly now that we are working from home, if we know that being fully at home all day really hinders our ability to concentrate or to focus on something or on studying, we might need to change it, as long as, you know, we're taking, of course, safety precautions and being as safe as we can. Sometimes it might be, I particularly can't stay in one part of my house all day, so I might go from my room to the living room or to the balcony that I have. So that also works out. Breaking up, Desiree said, breaking up my study sessions into smaller segments versus studying twice a week. Awesome, absolutely. And that's what we were talking about, breaking that curve. Maybe doing it in like 30 minutes instead of sitting down for 6 hours. 30 minutes every day might be better for you. Patricia said, proper time management. Awesome, yes. If you are aware of what you need to do, you can really prepare and you can really break it down into small, digestible, bite-sized activities or tasks that you have to complete, which you can, of course, put into your time management system. Carmen said, you can be mindful of your emotions and open your emotions to learning to receive information more efficiently. Absolutely. And I think this is really important when it comes to right now and being more in tune of our emotions, because there will be days when, I don't know if it happens to you all, but I know it happens to me a lot, that if I'm sitting down for too long in front of my computer, I start getting anxious and I get a little bit annoyed by everything. So that's when I know I need to start taking breaks and moving into a different, maybe if you have, for example, to watch lectures, you have to watch lectures on the screen, and then you might have to read your textbook, which is in paper format, then maybe transitioning from one to another, maybe doing practice problems in paper for your class would also be helpful. And of course, always going to SI and tutoring. From George, we have not waiting until the night before to cram, practice the long-term memory way of learning for you to retain information better, and you're able to recall it easier on test day. Absolutely, awesome. You wanna be able to recall information on the test day, and by putting it back into your long-term memory, you will be able to do that. Less procrastination, Carly, we're all there with you. We all want that. But it does help to have a plan and to be aware of also, because when you create a plan, you're also able to add in different things and different tasks that you'd have to do for different reasons. So when you do see that maybe I don't have as much free time to watch Netflix as I thought I did, that also helps out with combating procrastination. Creating a schedule for proper time management, Yasmin, absolutely. And you can also create a schedule for preparing for your classes, which is super important. Daniel said, people learn in different ways, therefore it is important to figure out what ways to learn for just for yourself. Fantastic. We actually have a section coming up on that, so we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then Reniel said, giving your brain time to go back to the information and actually retain it in a learning environment in order to reduce stress and improve your results. Fantastic. And yes, you need to give yourself and your brain a break from time to time. And if you sit down and study for hours and hours without end, and then you go straight into your exam, then you're not really giving yourself time to process all that information, take it from your short-term memory to your long-term memory, and also be able to refocus again after you've taken those breaks. So thank you all for participating and for sharing your answers. I think you basically covered a lot of what I was going to cover here. So by thinking about how we study, we can break down what works and what doesn't. And I will talk a little bit about reflective practices, which is super important within college and in every aspect of life, but particularly with your courses. It's really important to reflect on those things that work for you and those things that don't work for you. And after that, you can begin to try new strategies or modify your current ones. And I think I'm gonna skip a little bit about some of your current strategies because I have a question and it's gonna be our next question to answer. These are just a few examples of things you can do or some study strategies, but yeah, I'll go back to that one in a second. I mentioned that part about reflective practices, and this is what it goes back to. When we talk about self-regulated learning, we need to be aware of why we're doing what we're doing and what is it that we're being evaluated on. We also need to be able to plan, how much time do I need? What strategies should I use? Also list a set of steps. A lot of you have mentioned time management. This is where that portion will go into. Once you have realized this is what I'm going to be evaluated on, then you realize, okay, this is what I have to do, and this is how it fits within my own day or within my own schedule. And then you want to be monitoring that process or that learning process. So you want to be checking exam scores. You want to be checking, if you set for yourself a time where you will be a checking, like it would be a checkpoint. That's also really helpful to think back about what you do. If you ever go to a few of our services, we do something that is called thank you for your questions, Carmen. SRL stands for self-regulated learning. Sure, no problem. Yeah, so you want to be creating those checkpoints to see what are you doing. Is it really working or is it not? In SI, we do a lot of post-it surveys, and I'll drop the link for it. I'll drop the file of the post-it survey that we do, just to help you see what it is that you can improve on, and how was the test, and how can you better prepare for your next one. And this is also part of that reflection that I mentioned before. You want to be looking at what worked, what didn't work, what can you improve on, what should you do differently, and things like that. And this is not a linear process where you do awareness, planning, monitoring, and reflection, and that's it. This is a cycle. You always need to be reflecting and monitoring and planning and being aware of what's going on, because again, your context is changing all the time. So my question is going to be, before I actually drop the question, okay, I am going to share my post-it survey, which is what I mentioned that we do in SI, which is again a very reflective exercise that you can do for all of your courses after an exam after you've taken an exam. So you can do that, and I highly, highly encourage you to do it. Even look at the questions. There's going to be things there that you maybe have never thought of, so highly encourage you. But I want you all to answer it now in the chat, because we talked about using different strategies to better study and to better prepare, is for you to share what are your best study strategies and how well have they worked for you, and if there's something that you could improve from those. So again, like before, I'm just going to give you a few seconds to start answering that question in the chat, but if you feel more comfortable talking about it, you can do that as well. Awesome. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about the ones you've been sharing, but feel free to keep on typing whatever it is that you have found helpful. After we talk about what has been helpful, we're also going to talk about maybe some struggles that you have and see if anyone else has some recommendations or some tips for that, because I think the more we talk about the different things that we all do, the more we can help each other. So Jess said, breaking up assignments / chapters over multiple days so I'm not overwhelmed. Awesome. If you're someone who really struggles with sitting down to read an entire chapter, then breaking it down and going ahead and maybe setting up one day of the week. I personally like doing it on Sundays, where I sit down and look at my entire week and say, okay, I have this amount of chapters to read and this amount of pages to read. This is how I'm going to break it down so that I'm not sitting one day and reading, 200 pages, because that's not realistic, because I'm not going to retain the information, because I'm going to be bored, I'm going to be annoyed, and then after that I would just want to, go to bed and not do anything else for the day. So definitely knowing also, which is part of self-regulated learning, knowing how much you can take in a particular day. So maybe you're someone who is an avid reader and you can read 30 pages a day and be fine with it. There's other people that might struggle with that, and maybe 10 pages might be easier, but you might break it down into 2 parts per day. So you'll read maybe 20 on a day. So it's also being aware of what are your strengths, what it is something that you really struggle with, and how you can balance that. Jasmine said, flashcards and reviewing things on a daily basis. Reviewing daily has helped me a lot. Fantastic. Yes, you want to be reviewing information, and if you create some type of material that allows you to review it and test yourself, that's really helpful. One of the best, if not the best, study skill is self-testing, in which you and self-testing doesn't have to be that you sit down and have a practice test and do it completely, but it can be where you have your flashcards and you put on one side, you put the concept, and then on the other side, the definition, and you only look at the concept and you try to recall what that definition is. That can be self-testing. I know I read somewhere, okay, great. Patricia said, writing short summaries and points from lecture works well for me. If you create a summary and you add headings with another piece of paper, you could cover the definition or the content that goes over that below that heading. And that way you try to recall everything below that. So again, these are ways that in which you can turn your notes into study materials that will allow you to self-test, because you want to be able to try to recall all that information, not just passively read it. You need to be actively trying to come up with all the information to see where those gaps in knowledge or those gaps in information are, so that you can fill them up with different things. Jess also said that she could improve on her focus as she gets easily distracted if her phone is on her desk. Good. I think that's something that a lot of us struggle with, and we'll talk, I'm sure, as we do kind of like a chat round of what are things you're all struggling with. That will come up quite often, and there are different things you can do. If it's your phone, there's an app called Forest, and it's you can download the free one, and you pretend to build a tree, but if you open your phone, you kill the tree. So that's sad. So if you download that app and you set it up for a certain amount of time, that way you can block your phone. I know there are other ones, I can't remember the name, but they give you coupons to use in different stores. So that might also be helpful for you. Andres said, studying 60-minute blocks with 10-minute breaks in between. That way I don't lose focus or fall asleep. Fantastic. And yes, this is something that, again, as I mentioned with the reading, you need to figure out what is the amount of time that you can set for yourself in which you can really focus on the material. Also, you can do this with things that are not as fun. For example, if you're taking a course that's a required course, but you're not really enjoying the course as much, you could do it so that instead of sitting down for 60 minutes, you would do, okay, I'm going to do a 30-minute, and everything that I get done in those 30 minutes, that'll be fantastic. I'll try to do as much as I can, and it's only going to be 30 minutes. This also helps for, I know some of you mentioned procrastination. This also helps for procrastination if you set up a very small task that you just have to get started. Sometimes it's saying, I'm not going to write the whole paper. I'm just going to write, the title, the heading. I'm going to start the document, and I'm going to write the first paragraph of the introduction. Or I'm going to research the first article that I want to use. Sometimes just putting that task to get started on something, it's going to trigger you to get more things completed afterwards. Reniel said, never study in your room or in the kitchen. Instead, go to a quiet place away from technology and people. Thank you. And yes, I think this is a very important one. Figure out where is your optimal place to study. Maybe you're someone who actually needs noise going around, or you need people walking around. Again, taking all your safety precautions, but maybe going to the library to study. Maybe you're someone who needs full on quiet, full on silence, then maybe going into your room and making sure that you put on headphones and you block all sounds and you don't study maybe at 12 p.m. when people are watching all TV or when your roommates might be blasting music. Maybe you'll have to wake up a little bit earlier so that there's not as much noise going around. Desiree said, my memory is horrible. I could read an entire chapter and not retain a thing. Thank you. I think a lot of us also struggle with that. So finding ways to actively engage with the content is very important. So ways to do it is to take notes. I know it is a bit of an extra step, but it's really going to help you. Because sometimes just highlighting stuff is not enough, because you can still highlight stuff and not even remember about it. However, if after you've read a section, and I tend to do it by looking at headings and subheadings, after you read an entire section, you either sit down to write down a summary of that. It could be one line, it could be a paragraph, however much you need. That's going to be helpful because you're going to have a task, or you're going to have a purpose to remember that information or to recall it. If you live with someone at home and they are maybe taking the same course that you could read, not read to them, but explain it to them afterwards, that is also very helpful. That might be hard, so maybe you can talk to yourself, and that's completely fine. No one will know. I do that all the time, but you might try to explain it to yourself, and that could also be helpful. Awesome, I'm glad you like it. George said, do practice questions after learning the material itself to keep what you learn in your memory and make myself understand the process problem as well as I can, for math especially. Fantastic, yes. You want to be, particularly for math, you want to be applying it. I often see students really struggle with problem-based classes because they'll read all about the theory, or even now online, they'll sit down and listen to lecture and be like, oh, I studied, or they'll go to SI or tutoring and not be actively participating. If you're not actively being there and doing the work, then you're not going to be able to do it when you're in the test and you're asked to actively do it. You need to be able to practice to get there. So absolutely doing practice problems. And you can, with that, we talked about spaced repetition with combating the learning or the forgetting curve. That's also what you can do with practice problems. After you've done this practice problem, you can write down an example or a similar but different practice problem for you to do later on. And you could say, I'm going to study, I need to do this type of problems 5 times before the test. So I'm going to do it and let's say you have 2 weeks from now. So I'm going to do it today, that's Monday, then I'm going to do it again tomorrow, then I'm going to leave 2 days in between, then I'm going to leave 3 days in between, and then so on. So also spacing out when you do those will be really helpful for you to combat that forgetting curve. Andres says, I definitely need to improve when it comes to using my phone, as I waste too much time on social media. I think this is something a lot of us do, so thank you, Andres. I know some of you have mentioned that this has been a struggle, and I kind of mentioned Forest before, but what are some other things that you've all do to stop yourself from using your phone? And if you struggle with it, you can also let us know in the chat. So I want to hear your advice for Andres in this case, and also to Jess, because she mentioned it earlier. Awesome. So thank you to those of you who shared your advice. Patricia said that she turns her phone off. Fantastic. That's something that Renee also mentioned. So thank you both. If you're someone who's able to do it, that's great. Jess also said, put it on Do Not Disturb. I have found this one to be really helpful. I have a watch that gives me notifications, so sometimes I actually have to take it off when I'm doing things because I get very distracted with notifications, and sometimes even Do Not Disturb does not work enough. Putting it far, I can be very lazy when I'm studying, and if I sit down and I have everything ready, standing up to go get my phone is annoying, so I won't do it. So that could be something. Setting it on the charger far away. Thank you, Jess. That's also something I've heard. Putting your charger in a different place from where you study, that could be helpful. And then Renee said one that it says, give it to someone else to hold. I think this is also a fantastic one because that also helps you be held accountable. I've done this when I used to study with friends before, of course, quarantine, but I would give it to someone else and say, like, you take my phone and I take my phone. We would make bets, and whoever got their phone first would have to pay for food that day. We were cheap, so we were not about to be giving away food for that easily. So that's also one way to hold yourself accountable. If you have roommates, if you live with family, I was gonna say if you have pets, I don't know how that would work, but maybe your pet could guard your phone. I don't know. I don't have pets, clearly. So yeah, thank you for that. And then Desiree said that breaking up my reading may help as well. And so you mentioned that from earlier. So thank you, Desiree, for that, which is, yes, again, breaking up reading if you really struggle with that. Okay, so now I want to talk about things. We've already mentioned the phone one. Drop in the chat what is something or some things that you struggle with when it comes to studying, to learning, and to anything, again, in terms of getting ready for your exams or your classes, so that we can see and give you advice on that. So what is something that you struggle with that you would like advice on? So I'm gonna go ahead and get started with George's one, but because I think a lot of us struggle with that, so we can start that conversation going. But if we have some more things that you would like advice on, we can make sure you drop it in the chat and we'll get back to it. So thank you, George. George said, just sitting down to start studying itself after the first bit becomes easier, but just getting seated and starting to study is hard for me personally. And Jess said same. So if you have tried anything and you've struggled with this, let us know in the chat. I'll start talking, but again, I want to hear your input on what you've tried that has worked for you. So with this, I think the first part is there's anxiety when it comes to sitting down to study because sometimes you don't know what you're going to do. So the first is having a clear plan on what you have to do on that specific day. So I personally, and I'll show you, I have an agenda and I just write down everything that I have to do and I do it the night before. And the reason why I do it the night before is because if I wake up and I don't have a clear plan, I won't get out of bed. unless I have to work. I do sit down and have to work, but if not, I won't get out of bed and I won't get anything done. So always having a clear plan, and because you're doing the plan the day before, it's a bit different from, I don't know why, but it's a little bit different than from sitting down to start making a plan of everything you have to do right now. So again, it does reduce the having to figure out what to do. So you already have, again, a clear plan, and it's very specific, which is very important. Because when you write down in as a task to write a paper, and maybe your paper has to be 25 pages long, that's really, really hard. You don't want to be sitting down to write a 25-page paper in a day. So when you're very clear with what it is that you have to do, it's easier as well. So you would say, I'm going to study for 10, I'm going to read chapter 1, I'm going to read the first 15 pages, and that's all I'm going to do that day. And then if you look at your assignments, I'm going to work on homework 1, I'm going to do, since it's due in 3 days, I'm going to do 1/3 of it or 1/2 of it. Also, for example, if you know, I personally know I really struggle with proofreading my work. I really don't like proofreading my work. So I do that as a task afterwards. I would sit down to write, never to proofread. I will proofread later on. So again, writing down those tasks is important. Another thing is having a space where you can work and have all of your materials ready, where you're comfortable, is very important. And also finding time or including time to do things that you enjoy. So if you think about your day and everything that you're going to have to do and write those 25 pages in a day and then do your math homework and never ever have a life, that's something you're not going to want to do, and you're going to procrastinate completely. So if you set out time and you make a plan for, these are the tasks that I'm going to complete, and I'm also going to have time to, if you like exercising. If you don't, we should all, but again, if you enjoy doing it, it can be part of your thing that you enjoy that day. Or maybe it is watching a show. So you would set up, okay, after I'm done with these things, I'm going to watch this episode on Netflix. Maybe not the entire season, even though we all can do that in one day. But we're more likely to do that than sit down and write 25 pages. But you'll say, I'm going to do one episode. I'm just going to watch one episode. So also having that break time for you to do things is important. And then monitoring your emotions and your state. Like, are you hungry? Because if you're hungry, you're not going to sit down and study. You're going to want to do other things. If you have other pressing issues in your mind, you are going to not feel you're not going to be as willing to sit down and do things. So sometimes it's figuring out, I have all this in my mind, maybe I'm either going to take care of them first, or maybe I'm going to write a list of everything so that afterwards I can come back to those as well. So a few different things, hopefully they'll work. Just trying small changes will help you. Maybe you've tried some of these, maybe you haven't. So just try some of that. And then Patricia said, I work full time and I tend to get home tired and it makes me unmotivated to study. Fantastic. I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with. Motivation also comes mostly from doing things and completing them rather than having the motivation to do things. So I think it's very similar to what we talked for George, and I'm trying to sit down to do the things. It's very similar. In your case, you're already coming up with a reason why you're tired and a reason why you just don't want to do it. So sometimes it's giving yourself, as I mentioned with George, giving yourself a break. I'm going from when I get home, I'm not going to sit down because you've probably been at work for 8 hours or even more. So you're not going to have the brain power to sit down and study for 3 hours. So that's when you want to say, I'm going to get home, I'm going to take a break, I'm going to watch one episode of something. It's going to be 1 hour, and then I'm going to sit down, and I already have a plan from the day before. So I'm going to come back, sit down, and do specifically what I have to do. Because many times it's the anxiety of having to do more than you have to do, what doesn't allow you to really get there. Or sometimes it's the worry of, am I going to be good enough for this? Am I going to have enough time to finish it? So if you do have a plan, that anxiety is reduced. However, if you're ever struggling with more anxiety than what you think is okay, and you really need someone to talk about, I highly suggest you go to CAPS, to counseling and psychological services. And again, this goes for everybody. If you're ever feeling like, I think particularly now, we are more likely to have anxiety and to be stressed about the entire situation. So always talking to a professional about that might be helpful. We have 10 minutes left, so I won't be able to go through more examples or projects or things you might want to work on. So I'm just going to finish with a few comments. The first one is developing your own style. As we mentioned, some of you, I know it was mentioned that flashcards was great for one person. Maybe flashcards works for you, but maybe they don't. So someone else mentioned doing an outline, or yeah, it was an outline. So maybe doing that is what works for you. So everything that we talked about is just a starting point to get you thinking, to critically think about everything that you could be doing. Your experiences, your learning style, and your schedule is unique to you and only to this particular point in time, which is why if you really need more specialized advice and help, I highly encourage you to attend or to schedule an appointment with an academic coach. What may work well for some people may not work well for others. That's why I was wanting you all to share some of the things that have worked well for you, because maybe what I've done doesn't work for you, but maybe what someone else does help. So I highly encourage you to if you are in a class that has tutoring or SI, we also have these conversations within SI, and you can always ask one of your peer tutors or your SI leaders to give you more support or more examples or study skills that could help you succeed in that particular class. College is also a time to be flexible and creative, reflect on your experiences, experiment and try new things to identify what strategies work for you. Also, for some classes, what you had been doing worked really well, and now you're taking completely different classes and they're not working as well. So trying different things and being creative is important, and use the resources and opportunities that you have as a student to develop your own style and approach to studying and time management. Before I go, a few things is, if you're struggling to stick with it, again, develop a UCF support team, talk to your professors. They can also help you out with where should you be, what type of information should you be studying, what should you focus on, how can you prepare. You can also talk to your academic advisor. You can go to the Office of Student Financial Assistance if you need financial assistance, career services if you need help with any job hunting or building your resume or interviews. Counseling centers, so going to CAPS, again, highly encourage you. Student Academic Resource Center, you're here. We have even more resources that are really helpful. We also have UCF Cares, the UCF website, and always talking to your friends, to your roommates, to your study buddy, your family, about what's going on and how they can support you can go a long way. I actually have, I'm gonna stop sharing this. I think I sent one document, but I'm missing one more. So I'm going to share, Jess also sent you a link for the Qualtrics form. It just takes you a minute to complete it. But I also have, I know I mentioned the self-reflective practices and the 4-step or the phases. I'm going to send you that's not where I want to send it. A worksheet that you can complete on self-reflective, self-regulated learning practices and phases. So to be aware, to monitor, to plan, and to reflect on it. Feel free to look at it to really, think about the process, think about the things that you can do to improve on, and take on all this advice and see what else you need help with. I think my email was, hold on, I'll share screen. My email is here as well. So if you have any questions about anything that we talked about, you can contact me. My name is Maria Spinetti. This is my email, maria.spinetti.rincon@ucf.edu. So feel free to contact me if there's anything that I can support you on. And I'll hang out for a few more minutes while you all finish doing the Qualtrics form. And thank you all for attending and participating.